Welcome into the Monday edition of the McCullough Show here on FM 92.7, AM 1400. The Patriot, glad you could join us for the fastest hour in Detroit local talk radio, the program where all lives matter, where there is no political correctness, there are no safe zones, and where normally I am the trigger word. Glad you could be with us this afternoon. We have a lot to talk about, including the continuing furor over this ridiculous overreach, in my opinion, by the federal government in another attempt to totally transform America. Where this idea came from, I can only guess. But the state of North Carolina is now in some real trouble regarding federal grants that they get, and it's all due to, well, as you may have guessed, the new bathroom law, the new bathroom attitude that we have in this country. But who's right? And is the vehicle that they're using the proper vehicle to use? And where will it end? I certainly don't know the answers to all those questions, and I'm not sure my guest does either. Byron Henry is a constitutional scholar. He's a favorite in newsrooms around the nation for his straight-talking style. He has been our guest before, and we're happy to welcome him again. Byron Henry, thanks for being with us.
Glad to join you.
I, literally am astounded that we're having this discussion. It's something that, well, I never thought we'd be talking about it. To be honest with you, it just kind of came out of the blue. I guess I wasn't keeping track closely enough. But in terms that we can understand, what is the Justice Department using as its vehicle, and is it legally sound what they're doing?
Well, first of all, it is using the Civil Rights Act from the mid-1960s to say that the term because of sex, which we've all known to mean because of gender, and all the court decisions have said so, that also includes religion and national origin and race and all of the protected classifications that we all know almost by heart just from simply going to school, that term because of sex includes someone's transgender and transgender identity. I'm not sure exactly what gender identity means. My understanding is it's someone that believes or identifies with a different gender than their biology or their physiology. So, but they're using this law that's been on the books since the 1960s, and most courts, the vast majority of courts that have looked at this, has said that the Civil Rights Act does not include sexual orientation or transgender or gender identity status, and the law needs to be amended by Congress if it's going to include those classifications. And so this is somewhat of a reach by the Obama administration, and it is a little bit outside the confines of most of the court decisions we've seen on the issue.
I have long felt, at least as long as it's been going on, that it should be something that should be handled by the legislature. Am I correct in assuming that the Obama administration would much rather take it through the courts due to the fact that the courts have been so heavily stacked to the left under the Obama administration?
Well, I'm not sure they'd rather take it through the courts. Much like immigration, I believe they would have liked to have accomplished this through the legislative process in Congress, and they've been trying to do so. In fact, numerous Democratic and even some moderate Republicans have argued for a decade that the Civil Rights Act needs to be amended because it does not cover a sexual orientation or gender identity. The problem is that when he can't get what he wants through Congress, through the tough political process of making deals and dealing with Republicans or conservatives, he resorts to executive order, or some people say executive fiat, and just attempts to change the law unilaterally, as in the immigration context. And here, just basically a rewrite of the Civil Rights Act to include items that were never intended to be there. And unfortunately, once again, it's going to take a court to decide. Since he's not been able to do it legislatively, the Obama administration will take a shot on the judicial branch.
I want to, real quickly, it's 21 seconds long, hear the governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, and what he said kind of in the same direction that you're going.
This is now a national issue, and an issue which imposes new law on every private sector employer throughout the United States of America with over 15 employees. We believe a court, rather than a federal agency, should tell our state, our nation, and employers across the country what the law requires.
Now, this is new to me because I thought this was a requirement only in federal projects, federal buildings. You know the drill there. But that's not the case, is it?
Well, certainly Governor McCrory's point is well taken. The first point is this law only affects the House Bill 2 in North Carolina only applies to government buildings, universities, what we would consider other public entities, not private. The problem is if you take the position that the term because of sex means gender identity, sexual orientation, or transgender status, that phrase appears in federal law in many places. So what you're actually saying is you're starting here. But, the Civil Rights Act doesn't mention bathrooms. It mentions generally across the country. It sets the law for the whole country. And if the President Obama Justice Department is correct that because of sex includes gender identity, then it includes it for all the laws that use because of sex, which would apply to everyone that Governor McCrory mentioned. Therefore, that's why he said it'd be a national fight, because this is going to affect public universities and employers and entities in every single state. Because the Civil Rights Act doesn't just apply to North Carolina. It applies to the entire country.
We're talking with constitutional scholar Byron Henry about the bathroom laws and about the state of North Carolina. Let me go into something a little bit philosophical with you, if I can, Byron, just real briefly. I have been getting, as you might imagine, from my stance on this, excoriated by certain members of the audience. I'm not sure if they actually listen to the show or they're getting the information secondhand as to my stand on this. My problem with it is not the fact that transgenders want to be transgenders. I don't really have a problem with that. I don't think the gay community should be involved in the discussion. I don't think it's a gay issue. Other than that, I'm not going to stick my nose into it because it just doesn't make any difference to me. My concern is that when you take down the barriers, the standard barriers that have been there, I don't know, since Job, that say that, this is the little boy's room, this is the little girl's room. I'm not concerned about the transgenders that want to use either one. I'm concerned about the perverts. And we've already had instances at Target and other locations where these guys have gone in, hidden in the stall in the women's room, and attempted to take pictures of the women doing what women do in a women's room. And it's, who knows how long it'll be before they're in the locker room and elsewhere. And that is my main concern. And I don't think we have the money in this country to pose an armed guard out in front of every bathroom in the country or every locker room in the country. What are we going to do about that particular unintended consequence of this silly, ridiculous law? That's my opinion.
Well, the issue there, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, the issue here isn't whether or not we make accommodations. In fact, the North Carolina bill says that any of these entities, these public entities, can make accommodations for a transgender or others by virtue of having a single stall restroom or having unisex here for people that choose to use unisex and different. But the federal government says, no, that's not good enough. And the problem here is it's about whether or not distinguishing between men and women on the basis of physiology is against the law. Under this administration, if you distinguish between a man and a woman simply based on physiology, how they were born and what's on their birth certificate, that's a violation of federal law. And that would be new law to me, new law to you, and new law everywhere. And our Attorney General here in Texas sent a letter to Target asking them that if they're going to change their policy about restrooms, then they also need to have a policy and tell the Attorney General what the policy is going to be for protecting women and children in the ladies' room from what you said, perverts or other stalkers or people with nefarious intent in those restrooms. What is your safety procedure for these individuals? And we're still waiting on an answer to that. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath on that one because, you talk about Target, as successful as they are, still lays off people from time to time. J.C. Penney's about to fold their tent, and a lot of other retailers are having difficulty. And if they have to come up with some kind of policy, it seems to me it would be almost, undoable, unworkable for most retail outlets, given the Internet and other places that people shop. That aside, I've got another question for you. If the physiology is not the question, and it doesn't seem to be, Is there a possibility that it could be made a legal part of these proceedings? Because I don't care how many times you've been mutilated. I don't care how many hormones you've taken. I don't care what you've done and had done to you by professional surgeons or anybody else. When you pull that blood out and you check that DNA, a male is a male and a female is a female, and you cannot change it. Only one entity in the world can change that, I think, and he's not around right now.
Well, interestingly, every state deals with birth certificate gender a little bit differently. Some are very strict, as you said, it can never be changed. Others, such as North Carolina, actually allow an individual, if they go through the appropriate procedures and whatnot, to change their gender on their birth certificate from one gender to another, which I think Governor McCrory may have mentioned, and I've seen it in reports. It says we actually are inclusive, meaning if you go through the process and change your gender and you're a transgender, we'll allow you to change your gender on your birth certificate, and then you can use the restroom on the gender that's on your birth certificate as opposed to how you were born. And it applies equally to everyone. Whatever's on your birth certificate is the restroom you should use. So, but, some states you can't do that. So, that's a policy argument at the state level, certainly not an issue for federal law.
Well, no, what I was saying was not so much what it says on your birth certificate. I'm saying what's in the blood. If you're a male, you're a male. By DNA, you are a male, chromosome-wise. I don't care what you do. And the same as with a female. You can't change that. And why not use that as the benchmark? I don't see what the problem is.
I believe the state could use that. My example was simply to say that North Carolina uses actual gender characteristics or biological characteristics that can be changed. One state could have as their characteristic or their benchmark the way you were born at birth, your blood basically, and it can't be changed. You're a male for your entire life on your birth certificate. And that's another benchmark you could use, certainly.
We're talking with constitutional scholar Byron Henry. How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, it's going to be a lawsuit, a lot like the immigration thing. The immigration thing started a year ago, the dispute, and we're still in that lawsuit. It's just heard at the preliminary injunction stage by the Supreme Court. So that case has a while to be resolved, and this case is just getting started. Ultimately, a court will rule whether or not gender identity is included in the Civil Rights Act. But one thing to note, because it's a Justice Department action, which means it's the Attorney General under this president, when a new president is elected, it's a new Attorney General, and they may take a different view of the statute. If it's a President Trump, they may think, no problem here, we don't look at it the way President Obama does, so we don't want to continue this action. Or it could be a President Clinton. She could say, we take the same position as President Obama, and we're going to proceed with the lawsuit. So it varies from president to president, because the president is the one in appointing the individuals that run these departments and come up with these definitions and these memorandums regarding the scope of the law. So it could change with a new president, is my point.
Yeah, there. And clearly we're not going to get an answer tomorrow on this issue, and we're not going to put it to bed by even probably by the election. So what we'll do is keep your number on file, Byron Henry, as you know we have it now, and we'll be asking you to come back. Do you have an opinion on this, or are you just approaching it from the commentator standpoint?
Well, even from a commentator standpoint, I have a legal opinion, certainly. My legal opinion is that the Civil Rights Act does not cover sexual orientation or gender identity or transgender, and that the law should be, if that's what the people want through their duly enacted representatives or legislators, to change the law to include those classifications. At one point, it didn't include national origin. That was added. Religion is in there. So age is now in there. The Age Discrimination Act is part of the Civil Rights Act. So we add things as we think necessary in society. It's a tough process. It's a difficult political process, but I believe that that's the process it should go through. And if the statute's amended to include transgender status, then we'll all adapt accordingly. But it's certainly not something to be done unilaterally by a president or by a court.
Byron Henry, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it, and you've given us a good meat for a great discussion as we go on with the rest of the show. Again, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
And we're going to do that because we're talking now about the Supreme Court maybe being involved. We're talking about the Justice Department.